I've put this off for way too long. Hi, hello, beautiful people, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Lauren, and today I have a sort of wrap-up video. As we've talked about, my reading in the year 2021 was very sporadic. You're tired of hearing about how terrible the first half of the year was for me. So we're going to wrap everything up here and we're going to put it behind us. But there are some really great books and not so great books in here that I really want to talk to you about. But I do have 26 books that I read in the first half of the year through the end of May. And so I wanted to divide them up into 3 different videos so that they're not super lengthy. So this particular video that you're watching is the sci-fi fantasy wrap up, and I do have 8 books to talk about in this video. So I started the year off really strong with Legend Born by Tracy Deonn, and in this story we follow Bree, a 16-year-old starting an early college program at UNC Chapel Hill, and she's also coping with the fact that she recently lost her mother, and so she's kind of going to this college program and trying to get away from those memories and the heartache that she is dealing with from losing her mom. And on her very first day of school, she witnesses something that she finds quite crazy. She sees a demon feeding off the negative energies from these 2 kids fighting at a party. Of course, Bree doesn't know that it's a demon at the time. Later, she finds out after these kids come into her life, and they call themselves Legendborn, and they say that they are the descendants of King Arthur and his knights. They say that they're tasked with fighting demons and protecting the human world. So Bree kind of gets entwined in this new journey of discovering what exactly the Legendborn is all about, and she also finds out some things about her own ancestry and if what happened to her mom was actually an accident or if there was more to it. And I think that the most interesting parts of this story were the facts about Bree's ancestry. We didn't get a whole lot about that until the end of the book, and so I can't wait to see how Tracy Deonn expands on that in the next books. I will say that the Arthurian legend that's depicted in the very beginning is kind of dense and a little info dumpy and is hard to kind of understand right off the bat. I did have to refer to the chart a lot in the back, and I had some tabs that I would go back and forth to if I was confused. But by the halfway point, I just could not put this book down. There were twists and turns at the end that just kept giving me whiplash. I was in quarantine with my husband at the time that I read this, and he was playing video games with his brothers, and I was sitting on the bed, and I just remember saying, "Oh my God, what? Oh my God, you've got to be kidding me," over and over again, because the ending was just so crazy, so exciting, and I didn't see it coming. And I just really, really love this. I gave it 5 stars, obviously, and I can't wait to see what happens in the next book. There's potential for a love triangle, but there's definitely a really adorable romance in this installment, and so I can't wait to see what the next book holds for us, and I'm really looking forward to that. So the next 3 books I have are part of a trilogy, and each of them have like a varying rating. And so I have the first book physically because I was recently gifted it from my wish list, but the other 2 I do not have. I read them all from the library. But it is Clockwork Angel, Clockwork Prince, and Clockwork Princess by Cassandra Clare. So I know this particular trilogy is really beloved by a lot of people here on BookTube, and I think that has a lot to do with the characters more than to do with the plot. But this trilogy is part of the expansive Shadowhunters world that Cassandra Clare has created. And this particular trilogy takes place in the late 1800s. So I did read it with the intentions of reading everything in chronological order. But I will say that this one I think can be a little more confusing if you haven't read the Mortal Instruments first, because the Mortal Instruments seems to me to go more in depth with the Shadowhunter lore and the different downworlders and all the details there, and this just kind of skims the surface, I think. So I definitely think if you are going to go into the Shadowhunters Chronicles that you should definitely start with the Mortal Instruments, because it just really gives you the basic information that you need to understand what's really going on. I don't think I would have enjoyed this if I had not read the Mortal Instruments back several years ago. So I definitely recommend you stick to publication order for the Shadowhunters books. So the start of this book follows a girl named Tessa as she arrives in London, and she is going there to see her brother as he's asked her to come to London to see him. And when she arrives, she is approached by two women who tell her that her boring, mundane life is not as what she thought it was. Well, not so much the boring part, but the human part. They tell her, like, she's not a human, and they show her, but she is pretty boring. So Tessa gets wrapped up in the world of shadow hunters, and she's kind of figuring out who she is and some history about her own family, but not much really happens in these books. There is a very lackluster villain with the overarching plot, but the majority of it is focused on the big love triangle between the three main characters, Tessa, Jim Carstairs, and Will Herondale. And Will and Jim are the only reason that you should read these books. So like I said, this one is just very, very character driven, and there were a few things that I just didn't vibe with. Tessa just kind of, some of the things that she would do or say just didn't mesh with the personality at all times, and I don't know if that was just a product of trying to be this fierce girl while also being a girl in late 1800s when there were certain expectations of women, but it just kind of fell flat for me. And honestly, I don't remember a whole lot of the details from this book, just kind of the higher points. But I rated Clockwork Angel 3 stars, Clockwork Prince 4 stars, because it was a little more action and there was more focus on the romance plot, and I did enjoy that part. And then finally I rated Clockwork Princess a 3 star. The next 3 books I have are all by the same author. 2 of them are within a series, and I know that I've mentioned this before in a vlog or something, but the Citadel is doing a Throne of Glass read along. So I read The Assassin's Blade in April and Throne of Glass in May. The Assassin's Blade is a compilation of 5 novellas that give you backstory on Celaena Sardathian, who is the main character in Throne of Glass, and she is an assassin, and it just kind of gives you 5 different stories that basically develop who she is and bring her to the events that are happening at the start of Throne of Glass. I really enjoyed The Assassin's Blade. I will say the first 2 novellas were kind of hard for me to get into, just because you don't have much world building or character development. You're just kind of thrust into these stories about this character that you don't really know much about, and you are told, these are your characters, this is what's happening. It's a very straightforward story, but overall I did really enjoy it. And I will say that 5th novella, it really gets you right in the feels. And then in Throne of Glass, we start with Celaena, who has been held captive as a slave for quite some time now, and she is approached by 2 men and told that they are taking her to participate in a contest of sorts to become the king's assassin, and if she succeeds and becomes the king's assassin and holds this job for a certain length of time, then she will be free. So there's also a mystery aspect in here, as the other competitors in the competition are being killed off one by one, but there wasn't much action in this book, and I really wish that there would have been more detail of the different competitions and trials that Celaena had to go through while at the castle. And there was a lot of focus on the mystery aspect, but that just didn't grip me as much as the actual competition I think would have. There are hints of a romance or 2 blooming here that I vibe with, either one. So yeah, just the lack of action, I think, and just kind of the slow pace of it, I ended up giving it a 3 star. Then next I have A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J. Maas. This is the first of the companion novels that will continue the A Court of Thorns and Roses series. There are going to be 2 more in addition to this one, and I think a couple of novellas, I'm not sure. But in this particular installment, we follow Nesta Archeron, who is the sister of Feyre from the very first Court of Thorns and Roses book, and she is dealing with the trauma and loss that she suffered from in the previous original trilogy, and she is not doing so well with it. She's not taking very healthy habits, and so the inner circle decides that the only way that they can get her on the right path to taking better care of herself and being healthy mentally is to send her to train with Cassian in the Illyrian Mountains. And Cassian is her enemy that she really wants to bang So yeah, there's a lot of smut and romance subplot in this. The story really tackles mental health, and it does get pretty grim at times as you're in Nesta's head, and she just really seems to dislike herself. And it is paced really slowly. I mean, it's a very thick book. It took me an entire month to get through this. There's not a lot of action. You're really following Nesta in her mind as she's rediscovering herself and trying to get out of this dark place that she's in. And so it is very slow paced, and there are a lot of friendships in here that are newly built. There's a lot of new characters that we fall in love with here. And for me, I just really loved being back in Valeris and getting to see some of the characters that we loved already, especially for me, Cassian, because he does get a really big part in the story. Obviously, we get to see inside his mind actually, which is super great. Of course, I wasn't a big fan of Nesta, but I do think that this was a pretty good redemption arc for her. One of the best characters in the book is actually the house that Nesta's staying in. I don't really know the word for it, but it's kind of personified in a way in that she'll talk to it and ask it for things like romance books or something like that, and it will give it to her, or sometimes it's kind of funny and defiant. And those scenes I just really loved and laughed out loud. But there are also some really moving scenes where Nesta kind of gains this found family in some of the women that come to train with her and Cassian, because they have also suffered some of the same trauma that she has and are similar in personality, I would say. There is a bigger plot that's kind of underneath everything in this story, because you do kind of see that they're preparing for something big to happen over the next couple of books, but there's not much detail on that. And honestly, I couldn't even tell you much about what that was, just remembering what happened. But I will say that the writing in this one was much better to me. I think this did really well being in third person instead of first person in the original trilogy, with us being in Feyre's mind so much. So I did end up giving this 5 stars because I did really enjoy it despite the slow pacing. I love the characters, I love the world, and I'm very eager to see what happens in the next books. Finally, I have Skyward by Brandon Sanderson, which could very possibly be my favorite in this entire group. I was very nervous going into this because 1, it is a sci-fi, 2, it is Brandon Sanderson, and he is known for creating very high fantasy dense books. Of course, this is a young adult novel, so it was much easier to digest than those other books that you see people reading. In this book, we follow Spensa, who lives in this sort of dystopian world where they live underground, and the most prominent people are pilots who fly these ships to fight these beings they call the Krell. And there's not much known about the Krell. They just know that the Krell come after them to try to get the resources that they do have, and so they fight back to defend themselves. Spence's dad was a pilot many years ago, and he was branded a coward when he abandoned his flight during one of this community's biggest battles in their history. And so Spensa is now older, and she wants to get into flight school and kind of redeem her family's name and maybe even prove that her dad isn't the coward that everyone says that he is. She has to overcome a lot of obstacles, including people who really don't want to see her succeed. And because of that, she kind of develops this false sense of bravado. So her character development throughout this first book is really, really great, because she starts off as this loud, obnoxious character who's just like declaring war on everyone she sees, but then by the end of the book she kind of is discovering what courage really is, and how she doesn't have to be strong by herself, and how she can be fierce with friends. And it's just really nice to see that growth in her, and also to see her not feel so alone as she did at the beginning. She felt that it was her against the world. Something I did not expect with this story was to love some of the characters as much as I did. Brandon Sanderson does a really good job of making you care about a character really quickly, and then delivering these really heartbreaking or shocking moments related to those characters, and you didn't even see it coming really. The end is pretty open-ended as well, and kind of leads into, I believe, what's going to be developed in the second book. So it does wrap up pretty nicely, so you're not feeling dissatisfied when you get to the end of it, but there are still some questions that need answers. And so I gave this book 5 stars because I just really, really loved it, and I still think about it, and I can't wait to get into Starsight. And I'm also really eager to get into more of Brandon Sanderson's other books, his high fantasy, because I don't know, I just really love this. I think this was a great start for me to get into his books, and like I said, I can't wait to read more of them. That went a lot quicker than I thought it would. I did have a few technical difficulties, but your girl had notes over here to the side, so I think I did pretty good with that. But I am going to upload the next 2 within the next week or 2, and like I said, there will be 2 more. One will be a romance, and the other is kind of like a mixture of thriller, horror, mystery. I think there's some graphic novels, comics, and some nonfiction in there. You will definitely be seeing those very soon. And I want to thank you so much for watching today. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button. And as I mentioned before, please check out the description and find all the links there. And until next time, bye!